Right. So this vlog comes to you from a secret location in the heart of deepest side of Cornwall, and you wouldn't even be able to find it if I told you, which is the normal occurrence with deliveries. So anyway, digressing, the main principal subject of this vlog is a response to a comment that I made by the All Year Motorcyclist in his channel, where he was he had posted of himself rather teetering along a little narrow green lane, and I'd somewhat arrogantly scoffed, that's a good word, about his abilities, which I'm sure perfectly had a no worse than mine. But did then prompt response from me, well, I'll have to tell you my Enfield story, because it's a bit of an interesting one, I think. So I'm going to try and stick to low speed, little quiet lanes around where I live. So it all begins back in 1996, really. Hadn't long passed my actual bike test, although like many other bikers of my generation, I'd grown up on 250s, which are quite powerful in the day. In fact, more powerful than most Enfields even today. So I'd never bothered to take my test until 1996, and the first bike I got, because I liked the look of it, was an Enfield Bullet. 1992, I'll try and put up a picture of it somewhere, and if I can't find a picture of that particular bike, I'll put up a picture of one of a similar era. So we're talking 1992, so we're right foot gear change, kickstart, no electric start, carburettor, separate engine and gearbox, 4-speed, and it looks good, sounded good, loved riding it in many ways, but it wasn't terribly reliable. I did go over quite a lot of places, rides out, but realistically, if it got above about 55, it started to vibrate with a passion, and things would fall off over about 65. I'll get back later on to what is a good top speed for an old school engine Bullet, but anyhow, so it was a bit unreliable. I had one minor accident on it going to the BMF show, East of England showground, fell over on some gravel, so you can tell by that my standard of ability is not of the highest. Certainly I'm not a major off-roader, but picked it up and there was minimal damage, got back on as you did, and carried on. The reason I was going to the show was because of the other major problem with it, which is it really didn't want to charge, so it had a nasty habit of stopping in the middle of nowhere. And I remember on one occasion going to a bike meet where I had to be ignominiously taken home by a breakdown service because it battered when out of charge. On the positive side, I did get a nice lift on the back of a Norton Commando from another attendee, so that was some bonus. And yes, it was a bit of a sad end to that bike, because I did enjoy riding it, the sound was lovely, but yes, it had its limitations. That separate gearbox, by the way, you filled with grease, not oil, so you can tell how ancient it was. It had a separate neutral finder. Neutral was variable. So that was back along, and then fast forward many years to not quite the present, because we're still talking 2010. My relationship with a lady had broken up the previous year. I wanted to find something and avoid this Amazon Prime van. He looked very surprised to see me. Yes, it is a two-way road, my friend. It's gone. It's be a major road, me handsome. So we're into Fergie now, local village to me, very nice. I've got some friends live here, and they're lovely people too. When we're very near the Eden Project, as just but a side note, just literally that way. So fast forward 2010, I got the idea of having some adventure, so I signed up for a Blazing Trails tour, and Blazing Trails as a company is still operating, both in India and South Africa now, and that Blazing Trails tour was to ride in the Himalayas. I on a 17-day trip where you would attempt to get to a place called the Spitty Valley, which is a remote and beautiful location where you need permission to go to. It's very difficult to get that, so you have to spend literally all day in a government office in India. The Indians do love their bureaucracy. But anyway, getting ahead of myself, I'll intersperse pictures here, there and everywhere of things that I recorded. So I did take a camera on that tour and took lots of pictures of the wonderful scenery, the people, the events, the sheer lunacy of the place. Because until you've ridden a bike in India, you haven't ridden, basically, because everything there happens all at once, all day long, all night long. In Delhi, life never stops. I mean, bear in mind, when I arrived, I went separately and arrived in New Delhi airport, which was really very nice, air conditioned, but unfortunately the organisers of the trip had somehow neglected to remember that I was on that particular flight, and I wasn't picked up. So I got more and more desperate as the time went on. Eventually made various phone calls through and got somebody in England who then alerted the local representative, arranged for a taxi for me. So this is like early hours of morning. I'd been travelling for over a day by that time. I was exhausted, and then I got ferried in a taxi to Delhi railway station. Arrived at 6 a.m. in the morning in the monsoon, Delhi railway station, with 40 degrees centigrade, chucking it down with rain. That's an amazing place in itself, and education. There are people living on the platforms, the well-dressed men in sharply laundered shirts reading the paper. There were holy men, there were beggars, there were thieves possibly. It was just all go. I got bundled onto this train with the other people who had also arrived, and most of them were London Fire Brigade types, so as roughy-tufty as you can possibly imagine. Good blokes. We had some good drinking times together, and also a married couple, Mr. and Mrs. Mullet. Sad story to add to that, bit of an addendum later on, but yeah, I remain friends with Mrs. Mullet to this day, and I'm struggling to remember her first name, but I think it's Maria. I'll put the correct one up on screen, actually. But they were sort of quite nerdy people, because they'd been on a couple of these trips before. Very bikey, but yeah, good, honest people. They sort of adopted me. If you've not ridden an actual Indian bullet before, that's an even bigger experience, because these things are as old as the hills. They had all sorts of things wrong with them, probably, but we had an ace mechanic, could literally repair anything. Like, for example, one of our guys had an accident towards the end where he hit a bus coming on because it was on the wrong side of the road, and more about that later. And literally, the frame was almost bent in half. I'll show you pictures. That would have been a complete write-off in the UK. India, 2 days later, right as rain. Yeah, there's a difference between India. I mean, they could, repair things on the spot. I mean, on more or less the last proper morning, I blew mine up because it's been a bit dodgy all throughout the trip. Didn't really like going up hills. Went about down them well, but we had a last major hill going up and it just blew up, basically. Seized. 36 hours later, rebuilt, running perfectly. So yeah, that's a good thing about the bullets of those days. They're very simple bikes. You can fix anything, with a pair of pliers and a couple of spanners. Well, not quite, if you're a good mechanic. So, mechanically, that was fun. And we rode as a group. There was about 20 of us, I think. So it's quite a big group. We started off Himachal Pradesh at, I've forgotten the name of the town, put it up on screen, and we went onwards from there on, and conditions were difficult. Although the monsoon was supposed to be over, it wasn't, or it had arrived early. We were, facing really difficult conditions. The roads were in places non-existent, and by non-existent I mean, a foot deep of mud, rocks. You would cross through torrents, basically, over bridges which were very, very sketchy, under waterfalls. Sometimes the roads were just blocked because there'd been a landslide. There'd be somebody with a big digger trying to clear it, and then there'd be another massive rock the size of a piano going down these hillsides. And by hillsides, I mean they were about 1,000 foot each way, up and down. This is proper altitude, mind. We're talking about 10,000 feet plus. So really, really sketchy stuff, and you'd have to pick your moment to cross, go over the sort of heap, and then go like mad the other side. I hope you didn't get anything hit you on the head. We stayed at various little hotels, which I believe are government hotels mainly, because they're better organised than the private ones. Some of the food was amazing, especially the street food. Wowee. I remember we stopped once and we were looking around this little town in the middle of nowhere, and we bought a lunch. Good lunch it was too. Curry, dal, rice, everything, poppadom, chapatis. Cost the equivalent of 23 pence. Yeah, that's how the cost of living varies. Of course, there's plenty of rich people in India, but there's still a hell of a lot of poor ones. We saw beggars. I saw a woman with leprosy. She was begging. We arrived at the time of the Commonwealth Games, so they poshed up Delhi to try and make it look as though there wasn't any problems with these things. They shooed the beggars away, but they were still there. You had to be careful, but it's still an amazing place. The people are amazing. The scenery is amazing. Going back to the ride, I mean, I had one fall off when I was going around this bend at nearly 10,000 feet, and it was a hairpin, and the road was non-existent, and so I did come off, but then almost everybody else came off around that corner as well. So yeah, learning point. I remember saying to the exhibition leader at one point, I've never done off-roading before, and he said, you haven't done off-roading yet. So that's the kind of measure of it. And on the point of how fast a bullet will go, he told me, well, my bullet, I've never been above 50, and to be quite honest, in Indian conditions, if you went over 50, you'd been absolute lunatic, because you'd have sacred cattle going wherever they pleased, anywhere and everywhere. You'd have people on small motorbikes riding on both sides of the road, children running across, cars coming in all directions, street hawkers, concrete lorries, and then there'd be frequent hold-ups where you just sit in a jam for hours whilst nothing really much happened. But yeah, an amazing place. If you ever want to experience a place of, there is magic, go to India. We never did get to the Spiti Valley because of the conditions. It was a big regret of mine, but it was too dangerous, basically. We were told that the day after we left our highest camp, the next group had been snowed in, was stuck there for 10 days and had to be helicoptered out. So it's the sort of kind of place you're talking about. Very high mountains, this lovely little wagtail just on the road in front of me. We're in Luxilin, by the way, Valley, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. We just passed under that viaduct, which was built by a chap called Treffry, one of the first industrialists of this area. This is when St Austell was at the heart of the Industrial Revolution in the 18th and 19th century. Clay, tin, copper, boron, all sorts of mining. Roads here are a little bit sketchy. There's a river running through here, but there's lots of industrial leats, there's water wheels or remains of. yeah, it's a beautiful place. There's lots of wildlife in the river, trees. You'd never believe that, 150 years ago this was a completely industrial zone. There'd have been, horses and carts and trains and all sorts. Going from place to place, and now it's peaceful and beautiful. It's a great place for walking dogs. And it's quiet usually because most tourists don't know it's here really, which is great for us locals because we get a lot of tourists in the summertime, and bless them though, we do are grateful for them bringing money into the counties, often not very much for the local population. Anyway, enough of the bullshit about things moaning. I'll perhaps do separate blogs on other things too, but I just thought I'd do that one in answer to the All Year Motorcyclist question of what was my bullet history. And yes, it's quite an interesting one, and I may even buy another one. Well, not the bullet, the 350 Classic, possibly, if I can get the lower seat and maybe the shorter shocks, because I'm unfortunately a short arse. I say unfortunately because it does really bugger things up if you want to ride bikes. So many bike reviewers seem to be well over 6 foot. No offence to those guys, you are what you are, but there is this sort of unwritten rule that, got to be tall. Now then, I think this might be my right turning back to my village. Into the village. I'm doing a very good job of that, trying to talk and ride at the same time. Is not well advised, but yeah, you might be able to see some of the countryside here. It's very pleasant, but bear in mind this isn't all the next mining district. There's no tourism is a relatively recent component of life around here, and there is pride in the industrial heritage, the mining, and also the fishing, the agriculture. Yeah, where did the water come from? That's interesting. Yes, got to be careful here because there's a Mr. Bicyclist stopped to sort a few things out. Yeah, all this is recording. Yeah, I think my mirrors need adjusting again. So, to a bike with wide handlebars and a fairly small shed, as you catch them, you just throws them out of alignment, and you only notice when you're a couple of miles down the road, and then you might be in a dangerous situation. Let's get it. That's better. I can see now. Yeah, so this is a typical Cornish road. It's about as wide as they get away from the main roads. So progress is very slow. There's no point in having a sports bike here. Say 20 miles an hour, not be about as fast as it's safe to go.